Hi friends! I brought The Taxing Case of the Cows, a true story about suffrage to read with you today. It's by Iris van Rynbach and Pegi Deitz Shea. Abby and Julia Smith ran their old family farm in Glastonbury, Connecticut. Feisty and independent, the sisters loved their animals, especially their elderly cows, Lily, Proxy, Witty, Pegi, Jessie, Bessie, and Minnie. For generations, the Smith family had helped Glastonbury grow. They had always paid their fair share of taxes, which funded schools, roads, and other services. In 1869, when the Smith sisters were in their 70s, the town leaders, all men, decided that they needed more tax money, but they chose to collect an unfair share from single female landowners only. At first, the sisters refused to pay. Abby argued that they should have the right to vote on a decision that affected them. The town leaders ignored her. The tax collector ordered the Smiths to pay a tax bill of $200, about $4,000 today. Immediately, frightened they would lose their farm, Julia and Abby paid up. But the sisters, angered, began a public battle that would last for years and would capture America's attention. Taxation without representation, being forced to pay tax they had no say about, is what drove the American colonies to rebel against England in 1776. Smith ancestors had actually fought in the American Revolution. Now, almost 100 years later, men could vote, but women still could not. Abby called their own case, taxation without representation. Throughout 1873, Abby attended town meetings and demanded the right to vote. Often the men would not let her speak, and when they did, they ignored her, not even recording her appearance in the minutes of the meeting. So, Abby gave her speeches outside her stage and ox cart on the town green. When tax came due in October, the sisters paid an installment of $24, 12% interest on their yearly $200 tax bill. Male landowners were allowed to do this, but the town leaders insisted that the Smiths paid the total immediately. Now, on New Year's Day, 1874, a new tax collector, George Andrews, marched into the Smith barn. He demanded the 7 cows worth more than $400 as payment for the overdue tax. The cows were to be held for 1 week on the property of the Smiths' neighbors, the Hales. If the sisters hadn't paid their entire tax bill, by then the town would auction off the cows and keep the money as payment. The sisters and the cows were furious. The cows bellowed in protest as Mr. Hale led them away. "Nothing could exceed the trouble we had getting them into my yard," Mr. Hale said. The cows resisted every way possible. He and his wife sided with the Smiths. The 7 cows spent the week in Hale's tobacco shed, which measured only 15 by 12 feet. Crowded, the cows stomped and groaned. They needed milking, but they wouldn't let the Hales milk them. Abby and Julia had to hike over for the morning and evening chore. Mrs. Hale wouldn't let a drop of those cows' milk enter her house. She told Julia that it seemed like the cows were stolen. Demanding the vote, the Smiths stood firm and did not pay up. A week later, Mr. Andrews led a rowdy parade down Main Street to the auction. Bessie, the best cow, plodded right behind him. The other 6 cows followed, prodded by barking dogs and a drummer boy. Julia and Abby came last in a horse-drawn wagon. On the green, Julia recalled, there were 40 men waiting to buy an Alderney cow, cheap. When Mr. Andrews began the auction, no one bid more than a few dollars for the cows. Abby and Julia couldn't tell if the people were being stingy or being nice. Turns out, most of the town folk sided with the sisters. Finally, Abby and Julia gave a male neighbor $101.39 to bid for 4 cows. Mr. Andrews flustered and grumbled, sold! And since no one bid for the other 3 cows, he threw them in with the 4. Abby and Julia still hadn't paid their taxes. They had simply bought some cows for the amount they owed the tax collector. Newspapers made heroines of Julia and Abby. Lucy Stone, a well-known activist for women's rights, penned a running account for Women's Journal, the publication of the American Women's Suffrage Association. The Boston Daily Advertiser wrote, 2 Connecticut women are just now doing a mightier work on behalf of their sex than the rest of the country. And the Springfield Republican of Massachusetts asked, is taxation without representation, which was wrong in Boston in 1774, right in Glastonbury in 1874? In spring of 1874, the Smiths again refused to pay their taxes. At the town meeting in March, the men would still not let Abby speak. So, again, she climbed up on the ox cart on the green. She proclaimed, our town should act as a family, with people working together and taking care of each other, rather than ruling over one another and denying the women a voice. This time, as a penalty, Mr. Andrews filed legal papers giving the town temporary ownership of 15 acres of the Smith Meadowland. Julia and Abby, supported by neighbors, appeared at the auction several weeks later to buy back the land, but it had already been sold. Mr. Andrews had illegally accepted an early bid from Nelson Hardin, a neighbor to the north who had been trying to buy the Smith land for years. Hardin had bid only $78.35 for the land valued at about $2,000. The sisters vowed to get the land back. The tax law was clear. Movable property, such as furniture or working animals, should be sold before any land was taken for taxes. Abby and Julia sued the tax collector in the town of Glastonbury for trespassing and illegally taking their land. In court, the sisters said that they owned more than enough movable property to cover the tax bill. Mr. Andrews disagreed, claiming they had nothing of worth. At first, the judge ruled in the Smiths' favor, and then the town officials appealed and won the land back. Finally, a judge ruled that Mr. Andrews could not take the land. He could, however, take movable property, and cows, obviously, could move. Over the next few years, the Smiths still refused to pay taxes unless they could vote. They trudged back and forth to town meetings and to court. The cows tramped back and forth to auction. Each year, the sisters petitioned the Connecticut state legislature for the right to vote. Each year, they were denied. During the whole time, several cows gave birth. The Smiths named some of the calves Taxi, Bodie, and Martha Washington and Abigail Adams after the brilliant wives of America's first and second presidents. Supporters held fundraisers to pay for the Smiths lawyers, and one friend sold bouquets of cowslips, lilies, daisies, and hair from the cows' tails. The bouquets were tied with a black ribbon on which was written taxation without representation. The sisters eventually won their case on final appeal. They toured America, giving speeches and writing about women's rights until Abby's death in 1878. Julia died in 1886, and not until 1920 did the U.S. Congress add the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, finally giving women the right to vote. The Smith sisters didn't live to see it, but they had played a part in making it happen, and so, of course, had their cows. Well, thank you, Smith sisters. I'll see you again soon, friends. Enjoy your day.